true, that there is a permanent, unshakable, unchallengeable celestial supervision, a divine North Korea in which no privacy, no liberty is possible from the moment of conception, not just till the moment of death, but until well after. I've been to North Korea, and now I know what a prayerful state would look like. I know what it would be like to praise God from dawn till dusk. I've seen it happen. And it's the most disgusting and depressing and pointless and soulless thing you can picture. But at least with North Korea, you can die and you can leave. Christianity won't let you do that, because I mentioned another thing about the Old Testament. The Old Testament may have, any Jews and Christians who like it may like this too. They may have genocide, rape, racism, all the rest of the things I've mentioned, but it never mentions punishment of the dead. When you're done, when you're in the mass grave into which you've been thrown as an Amalekite, it's over. Not until gentle Jesus, meek and mild, is the concept of hell introduced. Eternal torture, eternal punishment for you and all your family for the smallest transgression. I have no hesitation in saying this is a wicked belief. I've also no hesitation in saying, and I mustn't trespass on the Reverend's time, that we don't need it in two senses. One is it's wicked. Two, we have, and always have had, a much superior tradition. We know that Democritus and Epicurus worked out in ancient Athens the world was made of atoms, that the gods did not exist and certainly took no interest in human affairs, and would be foolish to do so, and would be wicked if they did. We have the tradition that brings us through Galileo and Spinoza and Thomas Paine and Voltaire and Thomas Jefferson and Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein, men of great wisdom and insight, by all means struck by the awe-inspiring character of our universe, by all means open to devotional music and architecture and poetry, by all means aware of the transcendent, but look through the Hubble telescope if you want to see something that is awe-inspiring. And don't look to blood-stained old myths. Now, why now? Why am I doing this now, people ask? Well, I'll tell you why now, because in the last few years it's become impossible to turn a page of a newspaper without being, as the religious would say, offended. In other words, I don't think I sound self-pitying if I say that I'm offended that a cartoonist in a tiny democratic country in Scandinavia, Denmark, can't do his job without a death threat, and that no American magazine or newspaper would reprint those cartoons, either to elucidate the question or in solidarity. I'm offended that civil society in Iraq is being destroyed, leveled by the parties of God. I'm offended that people in this country believe that they have the right to advocate the teaching of garbage to children under the fatuous name of intelligent design. I believe that we're... I thought you'd never clap. Just as I believe that where religion ends, philosophy begins, where alchemy ends, chemistry begins, where astrology ends, astronomy begins, and now the people will say, well, let's give equal time to astrology in the schools. It's nonsense, dangerous and sinister nonsense. The Pope says, AIDS may be bad, but condoms are much worse. What kind of moral teaching is this? And how many people are going to die for such dogma? You see what I mean? So, I'll be very brief. There's an end to this, an end particularly to the cultural cringe that says that if someone can claim to be a religious spokesman, they are entitled to respect. I have to say it in your presence, sir. I think that the title Reverend is something people should be more concerned to live down than to live up to. Thank you.
Thank you. We will get back to some of that, but Reverend Sharpton, in your rebuttal, would you take a moment to correct Christopher on his misconception that religion was somehow incidental to the civil rights movement?
That's all you want me to rebut?
No.
Just feel free.
Cover that, please.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me and to have this debate. It is the first time in my long career that I was not assumed to be the devil in a debate. It's an unusual place for me on the stage. So I couldn't turn down representing God and the divine in a public encounter. But I think that several things in rebutting would Brother Hitchens says. You don't have a problem with living up or down to being brother, do you?
Damn right.
I think that
I take it
you
kindly.
made a very interesting analysis of how people use or misuse God, but you made no argument about God himself. And by attacking the quote wicked unquote use of God does not at all address the existence of God or non-existence of God. We are sitting in a room that, because of lights, we assume that there is electricity in the building. Electricity can light up a room or burn it down. It does not mean electricity does not exist because it burns the building down, or that it is inherently wicked. It is how people use it. So clearly people have misused God as they've misused other things that are possibly positive. But its existence is not in any way proven or disproven by you giving a long diatribe on those that have mishandled and misused God, because there are many that you can cite that have acted in a way that shows the goodness of God. Your book, God is Not Great, could be refuted by many that feel he is great or she is great, whatever way you relate to God. Science, to me, does not wipe away the existence of God, because science had to start somewhere. So to pick up mankind in its evolving state does not tell me where mankind began, how it became a long story of ordered steps. Well, who ordered them? Why do things follow such a natural progression? Who set the progress? And in fact, even the term wicked, if there is no God and if there is no supreme mechanism that governs the world, what makes right right and what makes wrong wrong? Why don't we just go by whoever's the strongest at any given period in history? Because nothing is wicked, because whoever's in power at the time would determine what is wicked and what is not wicked, because there's no real moral code, because there's nobody to judge that. So at one hand, we're going to argue God doesn't exist. At the other hand, we're going to call people wicked. Wicked according to who? And according to what? It would be based on whoever has the power at that time. So I think that the real thing that I'm interested in, Mr. Hitchens, is to really discuss the idea of God and the idea of a supreme being, and how creatures and creation have just by some great coincidence, an unexplained scheme, follows some order that just happened by itself. Something, some force, some overruling force had to set all of that pattern in, and it continues thousands of years later. Can you give a million examples of where people have misused that, where they've distorted it, where in the name of God or North Korea or other tragedies have happened? Yes. In terms of the civil rights movement, it was absolutely fueled by a belief in God and a belief in right or wrong. And had not there been this belief that there was a right and a wrong, civil rights movement that you alluded to or that you referred to would not have existed, because what made it wrong for people to be slaves? What made it wrong for humans to be treated unequally? Because there was nobody to say that they were all equal. It was whoever had the strength. But at the end, what is refreshing is that you are a man of faith. Because any man that at this date still has faith that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq has more faith than any religious person I know.
Very well. It's a very generous response. Do you mind if I take it in reverse order? The belief that the weapons of mass destruction, or rather the conviction that Saddam Hussein was interested in weapons of mass destruction, you could, I suppose, describe as an argument from design. In other words, he'd had them before, he'd known how to conceal them, he'd used them several times, he seems to be prepared to risk his entire political career on the idea of reacquiring them. I would say that was not a belief that had no evidence, and I would say that anyone who treated him as if he was innocent on the subject would be a sap, actually, would be my short word for it. Second, on the civil rights movement, I expected you to be more assertive.